Welcome to Lovesick, the podcast, where we dive into health, wellness, and relationships and their impact on the world. Come be a part of the discussion. Join our community by following us on YouTube, Instagram, and listening wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Enjoy the show.
Hello. Welcome back to the Lovesick podcast. I am your host, Jada Ford. With me, I always have
Michael Fishman and
Dorothea.
Mommy. And today we have an amazing psychotherapist and author, Erin Falconer. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Lovesick podcast. We get a little funny here sometimes, so I hope it's okay. Erin, question for those folks who are listening and watching, can you please tell us what a psychotherapist does?
Sure. I see clients who are going through emotional turmoil or are feeling unsettled in their lives. Either they are trying to work through past trauma or depression or anxiety, or they're going through relational problems. So they're having a problem with a romantic partner, a family member, something in their job. And we try and get to the bottom of what's going on and how to move through it.
I'm curious, what is your favorite passion in that? What drew you to that?
The truth is, I grew up, I'm Canadian, and my dad is a psychiatrist and my mom was a psychiatric nurse. And now my stepmom is also a psychiatrist. So I grew up very much in the world of, dinner conversations being around Freud and, Carl Jung and stuff like that. That was just kind of in, constantly in my periphery. And then didn't go to school for that, and went a very creative path, writing and then, creating content and stuff like that. And then created an internet company, a startup that we produced a ton of content with. And then I was able to sell that company. And after the sale of that company, I really reflected on, what do I want to do with my life? What's the next chapter? And found myself very drawn to therapy and what that could look like. And so I actually went back to school to be a therapist probably how many years? Like 7 years ago, something like that. So it's really a second stage career for me.
I think it's beautiful. And I asked that question and I actually got way more than I anticipated. And what I would say is for our audience, I think oftentimes people don't like the path that they're on, or they start down a path and they realize that they're meant for something else or something bigger. And I love that, I think people are afraid oftentimes, and that fear keeps them.
Yeah, well, I talk a lot about this in my first book, actually. If you go kind of the traditional route, I was like very type A, very like professional student, straight A's, valedictorian, like very going to law school, like the whole thing. And what happens is you kind of are asked to pick, your major when I was 17, and so 17, 18, 19 kind of thing. And then you just kind of lock into that. And it's like, you just keep going the course. And that's why I think so many people have midlife crises and stuff like that, because they're really going on the advice of an 18-year-old version of themselves. It's like if you're 40 and you're having a romantic problem with your partner, you would never check in with like an 18-year-old, like, what should I do? What do you think the right move is here, right? Mm-hmm. You'd look at like a peer, a contemporary, or somebody older than you that had, wiser. But yet we're picking these careers essentially at 17, 18, 19, and then just like locking into them and never checking back in, like, who am I now? Who do I want to be now? It's just like, well, for career, it's like, well, this is what I do. And then you think like, but I've spent so much time doing that. I don't want to just have that be a waste if I change it. It's never a waste. All of that works into the fabric of who you are right now. And then you take that on to whatever is next.
That's a really
Listen, I'm in a second stage of my life, so you're kind of preaching right to the choir when it comes to that, because I I was married for 20 years, right? So I'm rebuilding my life in a totally different way. And if I
Right.
asked the 18-year-old me, like you said,
Mhm.
what the best choice for this version of me, I would
Mm.
get really bad advice. So,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
I think it's true, right? We're not supposed to be the same people we were at 18 or
No.
But
25 or 30.
people don't like, honestly, that sticks with me right now. And I
Yes.
know that in my heart, but it's like hearing it out loud that like really is like something powerful, because you do
Mhm.
think about that. If you're like, I'm a great, like me, I wanted to be a producer for all this time, and I had a strict, like, where I was like, I'm just gonna go right into TV. I'm gonna produce these shows, XYZ. And over time, even things started changing. We're doing podcasts, we're doing different stuff, and it's like,
Right.
Mhm.
it's I just getting out there and trying something else. I didn't even,
Right.
yeah. But
Yeah.
some people carry that weight sometimes, because I do feel like when you said the midlife crisis, I do feel like some people either
Mhm.
feel like they've failed because this is not something that they want to do anymore, or they took this path because their family was like, you should just be a doctor,
Right.
and you're like, okay,
Right. Oh, totally.
yeah.
Yeah. They're forced because, it's not what they really want, it's what someone else want them to be. So, they're like,
Sometimes,
well, why
yeah.
don't you? Not all the time.
Yeah.
Or you
But
grow in a
that's
new
the
Or you
direction,
grow in a new
right?
direction
Like,
Yeah.
and change,
you
Yeah.
know,
and that's perfect.
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
should. And I think something else you said that was super important, not to cut you off, like, because I want to hear, and I would love you to reference your first book so that people
Sure.
can find it. But I think it's really important that we understand it's not a waste. That stuff is going to inform this version of you and what you
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
next.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a perspective pivot, right? As opposed to like, oh man, even bad relationships are growth opportunities. It's like, what did I learn about myself? What do I not want to do moving forward? And again, it's that really it's about you and checking in with yourself and saying, who am I now? I say you've got to have the answer to 4 questions at any given time. Who am I? Where am I? How did I get here? And where do I want to go? And
No, I
that should
like
be
that.
those 4 questions you should be checking in with yourself like at least once a year, because if you have a growth mindset at all, right, which hopefully we do, I feel safe that at least the 4 of us do, right, and most of your audience, so you want to be evolving and changing, right? You don't want to be the same person. You want us to have the same core values, but you want to be growing and expanding, not just staying the same, and that would involve making moves that are nonlinear, right? Because nothing in life is linear. So yes, my first book is called How to Get, I hope I can swear.
You can say whatever
Yep.
you want.
Yeah.
You are welcome and free.
The title of my book. It's called How to Get Shit Done, Why Women Need to Stop Doing Everything So They Can Achieve Anything.
Can you elaborate a little
Yeah.
bit more
Ooh,
about
that
that,
sounds-
please? Because I think a
Yeah.
lot of viewers may want to hear this in
Yes.
more detail.
Yeah, so basically it talks about my journey, really, as I was saying a little bit before, is like I was very programmed to be, self-programmed, not through my parents, but as a very type A person. I was like a very studious child, and I over-identified with my success, and my grades and stuff like that. And I just very rarely checked in with myself. I thought like, this is who I am, at, age 11,
Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot more growing and exploring and curiosity that needed to happen. But I just really identified with the more like the persona version of me, how I wanted the world to perceive me as opposed to who I really am. And so I was going along, getting, good grades and all of that. And then one day, when I was in grade 11, I'm Canadian, so I say grade 11 instead of, well, how do you guys say it?
11th
11th
grade.
But
It's like-
it all works.
I was driving to my best friend's house and to do some studying for some exams we had, and there was this ad on the radio to find Canada's for a competition to find Canada's next funniest comedian. And somehow, like, hearing that ad when I arrived at my friend's house, she greeted me at the door, and I was like, we're not studying today, we're putting together a comedy like a 10. She was like, what? I was like, we're doing it. We're doing this. And so I convinced her, and we put together this kind of comedy routine. We ended up performing at the comedy club and winning. And
Wow.
we both lied about our age because it was in a comedy club. So you had to be 18 because
Yep.
there's alcohol. When they went to book our tickets to fly us to the national championship, they realized, we had to give our ID, and they realized we should never have even been in that competition. So we weren't allowed to go to the national, to the finals. But in that was my first kind of like introduction to this like creative side of me. And I ended up performing comedy for the next like 3 years after that. I went, while at the same time studying, I went to McGill, which is a really good university in Canada, and then got into law school. And then on the eve of going to law school, literally, I had this next epiphany that was like, what if you just took a year off and pursued comedy, fully? And this was like a very scary moment for me, because I was like, what are you even talking about right now? You're starting law school tomorrow. What are you doing? And so I called them. I had it deferred for a year. And so that was the beginning of my journey of really starting to listen to who I was, and getting off of this track of like, just go, 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 head down. This is the plan, go for the plan. And so this book is really, that's how it started, is the genesis of that. And so I kind of chronicle a very, as I say, nonlinear career, and then my learnings along the way. And one of the things that I found is that women are constantly saying yes to everything and moving other people's agendas forward at the cost of their own personal agenda. And so there's like a very big divide over time about, getting farther and farther away from who we are, our authentic selves. And that causes frustration and burnout and all of the things. And so it's a book devoted to really kind of reclaiming your narrative and how to do that.
Wow.
I think it's awesome.
What about Pick Your Brain podcast?
Yeah.
I mean, the title is really interesting to me. So can you tell us a little bit about that podcast?
Yeah. So I moved. So on my creative journey, I gave up law school, ended up moving to Los Angeles to be a writer with no sort of plan whatsoever, and ended up being, kind of really hitting rock bottom. No money, no job, just really, really in a bad space. And I was like, oh my God, I should have gone to law school. What was I thinking? Like, this was the biggest mistake ever, And I was really down and out. And I remember, crying on the bathroom floor, like, right out of a rom-com kind of thing. And thinking like, I have to go back to Canada. Like, there's no way, I can't see my way out of this. And so I had the great fortune of having two mentors along the way, unrelated people. And I called both of them in tears and being like, I don't know what to do. Do I go back to Canada? I literally have no money. Like, I'm going to be out of my apartment next month. And both of them said to me independently, what is it you want to do? You don't want to just go back to Canada. That's a reaction, right? And when you're reacting, you're losing. You got to ask yourself, what do you want to do? Like, what do you really want to do? And so I was like, well, I want to write. I want to be a writer. And they were like, well, find a way to do that. So I made a deal with myself. The next morning I applied to over 100 jobs on Craigslist and got one response back out of the 100. And that was to be a copywriter at this startup, which was called People Jam at the time. And, so this is $15 an hour. This is the only thing I got. And I was like, okay, I can do this, or I can go back to Canada. So I said, I'm going to do this, but instead of just doing it like off the cuff, I really need to make a plan, because when I came down here, initially I had no plan. I had all the like imagination around what could happen, but I had no structure. So I took this job. It was when startups were just really starting to take off. Like the idea, it was like 2008 and the space was brand new. And long story short, I was able to turn that job into my blog, Pick the Brain. People Jam had this little company blog attached to it. And then the company ended up getting sold to a company called Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I begged my boss at the time and I said, you're selling the website, but can I keep this little blog? And he somehow, I don't know how I got him to agree to it, didn't allowed me to keep the blog. And this is when personal blogging was really taking off. It was just like the very beginning. And I was able to launch this blog and it kind of blew up. And it's still around today. It's one of the oldest self-improvement sites on the web. And I was able to build a really, really big following. It's all self-improvement. It focuses on motivation, confidence, self-esteem, generally self-growth. And instead of it just being a personal blog where I write my personal stories on those topics, right from the beginning, I engaged other voices and thought leaders in the space. So it's really a collection of, I would say, like essays really on self-improvement. And it was through Pick the Brain that I was able, and the numbers and the audience that I generated, that I was able to then create my first startup and raise money for it. So it's a near and dear thing in my life.
Yeah.
It's interesting how those things, the sequence of
Yes.
events, when things you don't think might not
Yeah.
work,
Mhm.
end up turning into something
Amazing.
bigger or better for
Right.
you. Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, I never could have scripted this, right? The 18-year-old version of me could have never been like, oh, yes, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do that. It's like when you allow yourself to have an awareness about who you are and how you're living, you also open yourself up to the magic of life and the magic of the universe, which is putting things in front of you that, again, you never could have scripted, right? So, but when you're on that just one track of like, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm doing, it doesn't really allow for any magic.
I
And
love this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people trust their intuition enough.
yes,
Mhm.
And
totally.
That's
I'm a big fan too of trust your intuition, but also women's intuition. Because I think women's
Me too.
intuition oftentimes gets, like you talked about from your book, gets kind of overshadowed or we don't trust
Yeah.
it. And I think women are way more intuitive in a lot of spaces than men are. And trust your
Yeah.
intuition.
Yeah. Yes. And I trust it and really take the time to listen to it, because we all have that voice inside of ourselves.
Right.
There's so much what I call noise. We've got the volume on chaos so up. And like when you factor in all of the stresses of daily life and then social media and then just what's going on globally, everything's so loud that we can't hear that voice. So it's imperative to find moments, whether it's through meditation or just going for walks without your phone or whatever that looks like for you, to be able to turn the volume on everything else way down so that we can hear the voice and that intuition. It's there. We just have everything blasting so loud we can't hear it.
we get that a lot.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like we talk about that. pretty
This is
often,
something we
yeah.
talk about off the air and on the air.
Right.
Can I go back to this moment because you've done a lot of stuff since, so we'll get to more. I love
Busy.
this. Have you given yourself full credit and acknowledgement of how brave each of those decisions is? Because like to do comedy is bold and brave,
Yes.
and especially time period wise, even more so then than now. But being a female in comedy is rough. It's
Yeah.
really rough. Growing up around comedians.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny you should say that. When I look back now at like those comedy days, I was 16, 17, 18, maybe 19 in these comedy clubs where this was like also just a way different world than even it is now. I mean, it was all men,
Mhm.
older men. It was a world where like smoking was still allowed in bars and stuff. So like
Yeah.
the room would be like thick with smoke. And then all of the male comedians a lot of them were very funny, but it was like a different time where they were also damaged. Like they were like older and bitter and like everything.
Yeah.
Two little 16-year-old private school girls lying about their age and sitting there. And it was just like wild to
Yeah.
think like, how did I do that? And then stick with it. I don't know that I could do that again, because I guess it was just the naivety of youth, but it was, yeah. And it was really like, I remember the first time I got up on stage for that competition. I mean, I was shaking. like in the bathroom. Like we went to the bathroom before to give, because it was me and my partner. So it was like sketch comedy as opposed to just me standing there. We were in the bathroom just like, I was like, what are we almost didn't go on because I was like, what are we doing? This is insane. But then somehow we did it, and we did really well. So that was great. But to your point about, do I ever stop and give myself any credit? That actually was really the genesis for the first book. So after I'd come to LA to write, and that had failed spectacularly, and then I kind of rebuilt this kind of incredible online career. One day I'm sitting in my office and I get a call, an email actually, from this really big New York lit agent. And they reached out to me and said, listen, can we have a call? We're interested in having you write something. And I'm like, oh my God, this is my dream. This is like why I moved to the States, cut to 15 years later, right? So I say, yes, we can have a call. And I put all these ideas together, like fiction ideas together of things I can write, things I've kind of been working on over the course of that last 15 years. And I get on the call with her. And she goes, oh yeah, we'd love you to write a book. And I was like, great, I've got all these ideas. And I start kind of like low-key pitching a couple of these ideas. And she's like, wait, I'm sorry, I'm confused. We want you to write a book about you. Like, this is not fiction, this is nonfiction. And like your story. And I was like, what? And I was so disappointed. Like, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to write a book about that's ridiculous. Right. Like, so I got off the phone and I was and she said to me, no, but you got almost 1 million followers on social, and you've raised this money. And she starts like listing off my things. Right. And I was like, yeah, no. And I'm not interested in that. And I was so dejected, and I got off the phone. And I was like, here I go again, thinking, I could make writing a career. And no, of course, I let myself believe this is possible. And then I go into my office the next morning, and I'm still, the conversation's still echoing in the back of my head. And I look around my office, and I had the good fortune of working with a lot of really talented women. But I looked around, and they were all so, just like me, like mirroring me, like just so focused on their work. Everything was talking about work. None of them were resting. Everybody felt like they were like low-key agitated at all times. And it started to kind of bounce around my head like, you know what? I have done this. It's not rocket science. I did not coming up with the cure for cancer, but I did do this. And then I did do that. And I did, X, Y, and Z. And I was like, this is the first time I'm even thinking about this, to your point of like, have you ever given yourself credit for anything? And I was like, wait a second, what have I been doing? My head has been just so down. Like I can remember vividly being in the bathroom crying. I can remember vividly having those 2 calls with the mentors, and then get my first couple days on the job of that copywriting job. And then everything else is a blur. Until that moment where I walked into my office and I start actually going, wait, what have I done? What have I done? Wow, actually, that's not nothing. And then I kind of got excited because I was like, but this isn't sustainable. What I've just done is not sustainable. And everybody in this room is doing the same thing as me. And so I was like, wait, this could be a book. This could be a book. So then I emailed the agent, and I was like, wait, can we talk again? And when we talked, I was like, what do you think about this? And she's like, yes, let's do this. This is perfect. And so anyways, that book came out of this very question of like, have we stopped to appreciate anything we've done, or are we just heads down going? Doesn't make for a happy life. No matter what if you're out there collecting trophies, it's irrelevant.
I think a lot of people. That's a really good point, because
Yeah.
especially when you're saying with the head down, because I was thinking we're so consumed in all the things that we have to get done or be or get whatever, and so when someone from the outside is like, just like when they came to you, like, hey, you should write a book about yourself, and you're like, why would I do that when I'm
read that book?
Yeah,
Like,
And the instinct is to say either I'm not enough, because that's kind of the theory that lots of people grow up with, or that's not the dream I really wanted. And the truth is, our dream comes to us sometimes, or our purpose comes to us in a different package than what we anticipated.
Yes, absolutely. So being open to that. Exactly.
That's so interesting.
And then sometimes you're in a situation where you don't feel confident enough to do something that's out of the comfort zone. So,
Totally.
you may feel like, well, I can't do that. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because you don't give
Totally.
yourself enough credit to feel like, yes, maybe I can do that.
Oh, absolutely. I think so much of the head down is fear-based, right? At least it was for me. It was like, if I don't just do this and just this, I'm going to be back in that bathroom crying. Somebody's going to know that I'm a fake. If I just like, I can't rock the boat. I just got to go and like,
Right.
because, and then, and then you do all of that and then it becomes even scarier. Like the idea of checking in with yourself, like, hey, trying this on, how does this fit? Absolutely not. Like the idea that it wouldn't fit is so terrifying, right? But you got to lean into that fear, right? Not dig yourself deeper away,
Mhm.
try and get away from it. You're never going to get away from it. You got to lean into it. So to your point, to then say, I'm scared that I might not be able to do that. Oh, that's
Right.
probably a sign that I should try doing it.
Yeah.
Like that for me is now the thing. Where do I feel fear? Okay,
Mhm.
that's where I need to spend the time, as opposed to like blinkers on, just fear. What fear? Nope, I'm going straight ahead, right?
Right.
It's like, so again, it's just when we take the time to be self-aware, it's like it's a little bit scary, but all of a sudden like a world opens up to you. Things have more color. Everything feels more dynamic and worth fighting for and worth leaning into the fear for. When we have those blinders on, everything's like black and white and just like
Right.
right. Not a lot of joy there.
That's true because a lot of times too, I know people that actually do the same thing, and they actually talk themselves out of a career transition or whatever the case may
Totally.
be because of fear,
Mhm.
knowing that they could apply whatever they have learned throughout the years, but they're
Mhm.
afraid to take the risk.
Absolutely.
Or often,
Absolutely.
or often when you're just even in the rooms with people that you don't think that you should be there as well, and it's like,
Yes.
but I do deserve
Totally.
to be here, and it's
Right.
like that, just that confidence. It's
Mhm.
just it's interesting, but
Yeah.
I think
Mm.
even for myself, I'm still growing and learning certain things, and even just the checking in with yourself. That's
Mhm.
something I just started doing recently, and it's interesting to hear myself. You know what I mean? In a way where I wouldn't
Yeah.
normally if I didn't take 5 minutes
Yeah.
to sit
Mhm.
down and just listen to myself. And
Totally.
it takes a skill, but I think it makes a huge difference.
Well, and kind
Yeah.
of bringing all that full circle, there's an element I think we get attached to this concept of who we are, right?
Mhm.
Or the
Absolutely.
titles.
Oh,
And whether it
yes.
be, titles of a job, could be
Mhm.
titles in a group,
Mhm.
could be a diagnosis of illness, like a lot of our listeners and watchers, but also can be the role of, say, a parent or a
Mhm.
sibling or where I fit in my family. And I think we start
Mhm.
to look around and say, okay, I'm supposed to occupy this
Or
space,
gender.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
And I think we start
Got it.
going, oh,
Yeah.
this is my space, right? And the
Right.
reality is no one occupies a space forever. You're supposed to
Absolutely.
grow. You're
That's right.
supposed to expand, and your roles will change because your kids don't stay kids forever. So being a parent
Right.
changes, right? Being
It's
a
true.
worker in a place changes. All of these roles have to change, and we're so rigid to like hold on to that role or the
Mhm.
title.
Yes, absolutely. The label. Mhm.
That's huge.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the older you get, you're definitely changing because you're going through different stages of your life, and that definitely does not stay the same as like you were saying when you were 18 or
Mhm.
17. That version of yourself that's gone.
Or some people just don't want to change.
Right.
I mean, that's
Well,
true.
Yeah,
actually,
that's true.
that kind of this is going to bring me to this question, which is, so you have another book.
Okay.
It's called
Yes.
How to Break Up with Your Friends. And I
Mhm.
would say the what for me, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but some part of
Yeah.
that to me, the first thing that comes to mind is some other people don't want to grow, and sometimes you outgrow that connection.
True.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So yes, that's my second book is called How to Break Up with Your Friends, Finding Meaning, Connection, and Boundaries in Modern Friendship. And there are 10 chapters in the book, and there's only one chapter on actually how to break up with your friends. There are 9 chapters, though, on the importance of really being intentional within your friendships. And if you can't be, or if the relationship is not serving you, then it's how to get out of them gracefully. But the benefits of friendship, it's the one relationship where I feel like once you become friends with somebody, it's like, okay, I've become friends with them. And then that's where the kind of work stops. Whereas we know in romantic relationships and family relationships, the work is constant, right? And if somebody has a successful romantic relationship, they say, what's the secret to your success? Oh, we're working on it constantly. Right. But friends, we just think it's kind of like nice to have, and that relationship should give, give, give. And that's not true. In that model, we're leaving so much on the floor. And so, again, ironically, this idea of it's a book about relationships is a relational idea, but it does start with the individual and really understanding what your needs are and what you need, how these relationships can serve you. But if you don't understand who you are, it's impossible to then get relationships that serve you, right? So the first part of that is really doing that self-audit and understanding yourself. The next part of it is that really having an awareness about these relationships in your life, to the level that you do with a romantic relationship or a family relationship. And when I started thinking about this book, this idea, I was like, why don't we have the level, the granular level of kind of insight and awareness around these relationships? And I look to psychotherapy, and within, classic psychotherapy, there's individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, but no such thing for friends, right? And while I'm not necessarily advocating that friend couples go out and seek counseling, although I don't think it's a bad idea for friendships. If you've had a really close friendship with somebody for 20 years and now all of a sudden it's not working, I actually do think it could be beneficial. But more than that, it's like there isn't a kind of agreed upon language for addressing conflict out there in the zeitgeist for these relationships. There isn't a blueprint for how to get into new friendships, how to get out of existing friendships. And generally, there's just no language around how to navigate these relationships. So that was the genesis of this book, kind of creating that language of how you can kind of advocate for yourself and show up for yourself, in the fullest version, and then have that be held by these relationships in the way that, say, a romantic or a family relationship does that.
One thing I find interesting, and I've curated some of these friendships in the past where I've been friends with someone in maybe elementary school, and then, maybe middle school we're friends, but our friendship maybe goes a different way. But then by the time we got back to like high school or college, our friendship became a little bit different. Some of them, when we got older, they became a little bit stronger. And then some of them were just kind of like, we're not on the same playing field. But, I have some of those friends that I've literally known for so long, and now we're like, because we're parents now, or because, something different has changed in our lives that have gotten us closer together.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's the thing is, to the earlier point, is like, hopefully we're all involved, we have a growth mindset. We're open to evolving and growing. And in that, you're not always going to grow in the same direction as everybody in your life. And it's not that one person grows necessarily in a worse direction or a better direction. They're just different directions. And if you're not connecting in the same way and the relationship becomes more of a burden or, less desirable, you don't need to continue it. It's like, the way we look at romantic relationships, for example, there's a very clear set, thing of like what we will and won't tolerate and all, and being blah about somebody would be one of the things that you'd be like, oh no, if you're like disinterested, well, you're not obviously going to have a relationship with this person. But we have so many of these in our friendship pool, which if you're not actively engaging with them, it's not necessarily a problem. But when it becomes a problem is if one of the two people is trying to engage you or you're trying to engage them and that's not being reciprocated. Then that becomes actually a source of irritation or frustration. And it's, in my opinion, something you need to deal with.
That's good.
No, that's
Yeah,
true.
I agree.
Yeah,
I mean, I do believe that people come into your life for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. And that's just
Yeah.
like you said, how to break up with your friends, because at some point they're only there for certain seasons of your life.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we
Mhm.
all, we all get older and we do separate things. And like you said, it may be something that you're no longer interested in and not intentional, but just
Mhm.
something that happens as you get older. But
Yeah.
I do believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then I think when you, again, having that awareness and being really intentional, when you free up some energy, right, then you can use that energy on the relationships that are really serving you at the moment, right? So you have a much more concentrated and focused energy on the relationships that are serving you and
Right.
and you're serving them, as opposed to having this kind of like spread out thinner energy across, I like to think of it as like all like 100 tabs open on your computer. You got to close some of those tabs and have focus on, 9 or 10, or 5 or 6, whatever your number is. But it's really hard to do that when you've kind of got, you're friends with a ton of people, but not really friends with them. And it's like, well, we used to be friends 15 years ago. And I guess, but I feel connected to them when I come back from hanging out with them. Do I feel like recharged or do I feel a little drained? Do I feel, so really just paying attention. I like to say there's like a litmus test. If my phone rings, in the middle of a work day, right? My phone rings and I see a name on the call display. How many times do I go, oh, and there's some people,
Oh,
and then
that's a
there's
great
some people,
analogy.
Jada and I have this conversation a lot, and
right?
and I'm a huge person of like I don't think everybody's a friend. I think we use that term way too
Yes.
loosely.
That's true.
I talk about that in the book. The
Absolutely.
overcommoditization of the word friend in and
Right.
of itself is a
Mhm.
problem.
Yeah, Jada and I became friends, but Jada will tell everybody in the world that was not an easy process. 'Cause I'm not because am
It
I
wasn't.
lying?
No, it's the
yeah,
truth. No, you're right,
We,
you're right.
we go through this all the time whenever people are like, "Oh, how long have you known each other?" and we start talking. It's like the truth is, I meet people. Some
Mhm.
people are acquaintances. Then
Mhm.
I get friendly with people. It takes a while for you to make it to friend because,
True.
like, I have a very clear kind of set of boundaries and
Mhm.
standards, and
Yeah.
same thing in kind of all my
That's amazing.
relationships. And I
Mhm.
try really hard to reevaluate them frequently, and I
Yeah.
reevaluate how much I'm giving, not so much because I want to pull back,
Mhm.
but more like I try really hard if it's a person that I value, I want to
Mhm.
make sure that I'm giving value, but
Right.
that I'm giving it in a way that is beneficial to both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's the important thing. It's that audit. It's just really checking in and like
Mhm.
not just like we're friends and then like never really reflect back on
No,
Well,
that is
don't you
true.
think that's what can be with age too? Because I feel like when
Yeah.
you're a school kid in the playground, you're
Yeah.
playing with these are my 20 friends.
Yeah.
When you're, your 20s and you might be going clubbing with a group of people, these are the friends that I always go clubbing with. But I feel like the older I get, and I've had to break up with friends too.
Yeah.
I feel like the older I get, I realize how important these friendships can be. And if you
Yeah.
have the time already as a busy mom or a person working or whatever, and you can still check in with these friends or spend time with them and have these moments, I think it's huge. And I wouldn't
Yeah.
have, and I say my friends are less than I had before because it's like the time I give and the value.
It's also harder to make friends, though,
True.
as you get
That
older,
is
because
true.
I think
That's
people
true.
get very structured about who their friends are
Yep.
or how they spend their time. And I do think that's something we lose from our childhood to our adulthood is
Yes.
if we would just play more. I mean, you and I talk about this all the time because the way we mess around or talk or like do stuff, like sometimes, because I'm a big kid I'm not
Yeah.
for everybody. I'm gonna tell people ahead of time. Like if I go
That's
out in the
true,
world and
everybody.
I wanna go do adventures and like I'm literally I look at climbing stuff and jumping over stuff like that part of me I've never gotten rid of and I'm really thankful for, but it makes it easy for me to meet people and connect with people.
Yeah.
But then I have to evaluate how deep is the connection and I have to
Mhm.
let it grow, right? And I have to understand that there's levels. And I think what happens is when we were kids, it was easy because you got
Right.
connected on kind of a deep level because there wasn't that much depth to
Right.
begin with. So everything
True.
felt deep.
Yeah. Well, and also everything when you're a kid is very situational. Like you're dropped
True.
in a sandbox and say, play with these people. Like,
Yeah.
it's
That's true.
proximity,
Yeah.
you're not, so it's like, okay, I can connect over this sandcastle or, whatever. But then that's what, as you get older, that's you start being identified by who you choose, right? Because
Mhm.
before there's no choice. You're literally put in this, or, here's my mom's friends that the kids of my mom's,
That's
you're
true.
just being placed people and say, make friends. Um, then as you get into your teen years, that's really the first time you're starting to say, like, who do I want to be? I mean, this is subconscious, not conscious. And you start defining that by who you're choosing to hang out with or not hang out with, right? It's like, what group am I going to be in? What group? And those are all like things to design to discover who you are. And then, that starts to grow with what stage of life are you at? And then when you get to a later stage, like after you've had kids, that's when the choice really, really comes back in because there are no things being dropped in front of you, right? There are no kids soccer games or, college dorm, being put in the vicinity or first job stuff. So it is really liberating, but also very scary because it's the first time it's almost like being back in that teen years, right? Where you're like, I'm going to start to redefine who I am now with who I'm hanging out with. And we haven't flexed those muscles very often of like putting ourselves actively in the position to meet new people. And so I actually sold this book, the proposal for this book, February 23rd, 2020. I thought it was an important idea then. Less than a month later, we were in national lockdown and we'd been ripped away everybody had been ripped away, from their friends. You were just in these tiny little bubbles. And I think that was like the first reckoning, which one of the silver linings was you really started to be like, who do I miss? Who do I absolutely not miss? Who am I getting a Zoom happy hour invite from? Where I'm like, what? No. And who am I getting a Zoom happy hour invite from? Being like, yes, I haven't seen you. I want to talk. And
Yeah.
so we started to have this awareness, right?
Mhm.
But then coming out of it, there was a lot of anxiety because it's like, okay, well, I don't necessarily want to re-engage with all of these people I've now like been able to kind of shed, but now I feel lonely and I don't really have that many friends. This was like the story for a lot of people coming out of the pandemic. And this is what I would hear in my room, as a therapist all the time. Like, I feel so alone. I feel so lonely. I don't know what to do. And so I said, we really need to approach this, have this mindset again, taking from that dating model, right? Like when you break up with somebody and you're single, and then you're like, okay, I think I'm ready to get back out there. You have that moment, you start to think like, okay, I feel like I'm ready, right? What do? What's the first thing you do? You call your friends, you call a friend, you call a family member, you talk to a coworker, you go, hey, I think I'm ready to get back out there. You know anybody, right? Every bar or restaurant or social gathering you walk into, the first thing you do is you look around and say, anybody interesting here? Anybody interesting here, right? You're actively trying to access connection, right? Albeit a romantic connection, but finding friends should be no different, right? Saying to another friend or a coworker, hey, I really feel like I'm looking for another friend. I really feel like I'm trying to fill this space in my life. Oh, all of a sudden now you've got somebody else thinking, oh, who do I know? Who would be great, And so you start putting that out there into the universe and then looking at your habits, right? If you have a dog, instead of walking your dog around the block in isolation, where's the nearest dog park? Go to a dog park. Put yourself
Mhm.
to your point of like putting yourself in those social situations. you know you have at least one thing in common with everybody else at that park. Hopefully, they've all got dogs.
You mean it's bad when I go to the dog park alone without my dog? If I just walk in the dog park and see that person seems listen, how people treat their pets is a great evaluator of
It's true. That's very true.
Absolutely.
but it's wrong for me to go to the dog
Facts.
park alone.
bit.
I guess that's why people look at me funny.
And the same can be said, you like to run or jog. Don't just jog around the beach. There's run clubs all over all over town. Find a run club. You like to ride your bike? Find a bike. Again, it's like being intentional and not just waiting for life to happen to you. If you want something, if you need something, go out and get it. And most people are feeling just like you are, right? Alone, wanting connection, wanting friends. I would say that is far more common than the people that are like, no, I'm good. I got it. I'm feeling like, so like putting yourself out there in that way, it will be received very well, largely, I feel.
And I think neuroplasticity, like the ability to change your
Absolutely.
brain, right? Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
if there's something you've always wanted to try, when we're kids, you're like, oh, that looks cool. Let me see it. Let me try it.
Yeah.
Let me go over there.
Yeah.
Or so you see somebody doing something, you're like, oh, then you get older and you're like, I don't know if I should go talk to that
Yeah.
person. And I'm so the opposite. I mean,
Well, what's the kid language? Do you want to play with me?
Well, that's
Wanna
it.
do-
Yeah, right.
And I'm
like,
literally
Yeah.
that's me. Is I
Yeah.
go up to people all the time and jokes because I'll literally walk up to somebody like, "That's really cool. Can you tell me more about that?" Or what is that
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
But go find activities that look interesting
Yeah,
to you. I
that's
mean,
true.
as simple as like, if you've always wanted to juggle, find
Go
a
juggle.
juggling trainer. Find people who juggle. Like now with the internet, you can find somebody there's a group for everything.
There's a
sure
group
is.
for
It
everything
really is.
in a good way, though. I think
Yes.
that's amazing because it's such a support group,
Right.
and at least like you said, you find one thing in common with someone, and that's the juggling group. I don't know, and you start there. But that's how you
Yeah,
start
you
those
start there.
connections.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I tell often to my clients that when they're feeling stifled or lonely or just this, I say this for many, many conditions. I highly encourage people to go take an improv comedy class.
Mhm.
Just like a six sessions, because, and I don't know if every town in America has this, but certainly in Los Angeles there are a ton of them, because you get there, first of all, you're with a lot of other people that are very scared and all out of their comfort zone. So there's like an immediate connective tissue. And then you having to go up and just kind of get out of your head and literally be silly is such an empowering thing. And it is such a way to get to know a different side of yourself. And that is the mindset that you should bring into every social setting, right? It's like being in the moment, paying really attention to what's going on, and then acting, getting out of the head and acting. I don't mean acting like an actor, but taking action, right? Like get out of the head and overthinking and into taking action. Hey, that's really cool. What are you doing? So the internal version of that would be like that. What that person's doing is cool. I don't think I could ever do that. Oh, if I go over, I might be interrupting him. I don't do that. That's the thinking version. The action version is, what that person's doing is cool. Hey, what you're doing is cool. Tell me more. That's taking action. Get out of the head, get into action. And then, so like, that's what improv classes teach you, right? It's like, you can't think, you gotta act. What's in your mind? Act on it.
And now, yeah, it's me. It is
you.
me.
It is
but,
you.
That's
but,
you.
but I also did performed for 4 years doing improv, right? So like some part of that. I mean, to your point, and what I would say to people is, you don't have to be in a big city anymore, because now I know improv groups that are online and on Zoom.
Online.
Like you
It's
can
true.
meet
Yes, it
people
is
and
true.
exercise that muscle without ever leaving your home, which gives you the benefit of afterwards going, oh man, I can't believe I really said that in front of all these people. But you're on your own. But part of it is we waste way too much time worried about how other people feel about something we
Perception.
said.
Because
like the
someone's always
perception
going
of
to
it.
say something about
Right,
everything.
good or bad.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I've lived a life of public where criticism comes with the inherent part of it, right? So
Right.
even if it's great, someone's going to hate it because it's great, because that's
Yeah.
their bitter part of their
Right.
life, right? Like that's
Yeah.
their
Haters are
joy.
everywhere.
No, but like some people take joy in criticizing.
They
So
do.
you
Right.
can't take every one of those personal. And I'm going to meet people. I walk up to people all the time and say, "Hey, tell me about this thing you're doing." And there's plenty of times where like, "I'm busy." I'm like, Okay, that's not about me, right? Like a little kid. I'm like, oh, that's not about me. That's an insult to whoever they met before, right?
Right.
Like, that's not
Right.
me. Like, I didn't piss you off, but sure, maybe
Right.
you're busy. Maybe I caught you at the wrong time. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll get the
Yeah.
next person.
You don't take it personal.
Yeah, the idea of depersonalizing everything is people take things so personally and all of a sudden have created a narrative like if you could just step back and look at that interaction and say, I saw somebody doing something cool. I walked up and said, "You're doing something cool." And then they said, "I'm busy. I can't talk to you." There's nothing there's literally you did nothing, right? But
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's like, what did I do? I look like such an idiot. Maybe I did it. No, none of that's true. It has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them.
Yeah, and I think there's a very interesting point, when you talked about that internal dialogue, right?
Mm.
I think that's something a lot of us get into, especially people who want to be high achievers or come from really driven families. You
Yeah.
get this concept of I have to do all these things perfect or I have to do all these
Mm.
things so well. And so you start
Mm.
ruminating in your head of what it means about you, what it means if you're not having success, or what it means to
Mhm.
do this thing.
Mhm.
And it's such a barrier to trying new things or
Well,
experiencing.
it paralyzes you, right? Like it's like you can't move, and the antidote is to move. The only thing you need to do is to do something.
Right.
Stop thinking and do. But it is if you have that perfectionist mindset, or if you have deep insecurities, you'll talk yourself out of things all day long.
Yeah, and we have to play. I
Yeah.
don't know where this concept that like we grow up and we become serious. And I grew up
Right.
in a world of professionalism because I started working at 6 years old.
Mhm.
So there was this pressure to be, and it made me a worse performer, and it made things really difficult as I got to be a teenager because I became very self-aware in a way that was very negative, right? Because you're trying to be a perfectionist or be so professional. And the truth is, who are all the people that we love in our life, or who are the people that we enjoy seeing? It's the people who are creative, the people who are daring, the people who will say that playful thing. Who do you want as your friends? It's not the person who's really well organized and
Yeah.
and very efficient with their time, because there's a moment for that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
we can overstructure our lives, I think, as we grow up and get older. And I think it's fun to be silly with people. Those are your best friends as you get older. Remember that time, and then you start joking about stuff and laughing.
Yeah, totally.
But I also think the warning sign for me too, when I look at a friendship, right, is am I only talking about, you remember that time, or remember what we used to do? Because
Mhm.
then I'm like, oh, this isn't a present relationship. This is a past
That's right.
Boom.
collective thing.
Yes.
So we're
Right.
either building something going
Yeah.
forward, or we may have had our time. And going back to what you said, Dot, like we had a season,
Right.
right? But our season may have passed because all
That's
I'm doing
right.
is reliving that season.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, and there's a fine line between being nostalgic because that brings you back to like an inner child or an a specific and or just living in the past.
Right.
So like really saying like it's because in the book I talk about different types of relationships, and one of them is the nostalgic friend, and that's somebody that like keeps you connected and grounded to who you were and where you came from,
Mhm.
but you still need to be having present experiences with that relationship. It can't be all just backward looking.
Right. Not back in the day, everything's
Yeah.
back in the day, back in the day. What about today?
Right? Yeah.
What about today?
Tomorrow. What about today? Back
Gotta be
in
present.
the day. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Man. Well, I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Definitely learned a lot.
Well, and here's what I hope people will do is I hope people take a look at your books and all of your content, because I think how it touches people is different. That's also very personal. And I think
Mhm.
it's how we connect with each other is to find it, and then to find somebody you love to share it with.
Yeah.
Because you came to us and shared with us, and this is
Right.
kind of what we do with each other and what we want to do with our audience, and they share with us and they teach us. And I'm so thankful for you coming and sharing all of this with us.
Oh, guys, thank you for having me. This has been so fun.
How can people get in touch with you?
I am on social, all things social, at Erin Falconer or at Pick the Brain. And then my books are wherever you buy books, Amazon, independent booksellers, Barnes & Noble.
Awesome.
Now,
Okay. Sounds good.
before we go, what is if you were going to leave somebody, right? Somebody came to you, given our kind of huge conversation, you're such a aware, right,
Mhm.
leader in this realm, what is the thing that you would want our audience to kind of know or trust in themselves?
That every single person has an inner voice, that is a fact. It is your job to turn the volume down and listen to that voice. That's your responsibility. Your responsibility is not to cultivate an inner voice. The inner voice is there. It is your responsibility to find the way to turn the volume down and listen to that inner voice. And once you're doing that, then my second piece of advice is do not be scared, be open to the magic of the universe. Be guided by that inner voice. That is the only voice that truly matters.
That is
Beautiful.
great advice.
That is.
Beautiful.
Really
That's
good
amazing.
advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
You have definitely taught us something. I mean, a lot of things that you said will stick with me, and I'm
Aw.
sure will stick with all of us, certain conversations that you mentioned. But we really do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy
Thanks.
schedule to talk with us.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And for our audience, like this is a conversation. This is one to have with your friends.
Right.
Like this is one of those episodes, a great one to share and kind of grow and expand. And for this to continue the conversation with us and through our media and to remember to make sure that that voice inside your head is kind to you, because the parts that are not kind oftentimes came from someone else along the way, and to find the nice, kind part of yourself. Because I think if our friends talk to us the way we talk to ourselves sometimes, they wouldn't be our friends any longer.
Right.
Exactly.
So be kind.
100%.
So thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming and being part
everyone.
of the
Thanks
show.
for tuning
Thanks.
in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.